Well, here's the big case scheduled for tomorrow. The electoral bonds case. The Attorney General has submitted an affidavit before the Supreme Court. The Attorney General, in fact, has told the Supreme Court that citizens have no right to know the source of political parties' funding. It has further said that the right to know must be subjected to reasonable restrictions, finally noting that the electoral bond scheme does not impinge upon any existing right of any person. And to take this discussion forward, I'm now joined by the former Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. TS Krishnamurthy. Mr. Krishnamurthy, thank you so much for joining us, for taking our time. First question, it is accepted wisdom, it is an widely accepted position that the independence of whether we talk about institutions or professions or whether we talk about judges, regulators, all of that independence is very closely linked to who is paying them, and therefore a need is felt for disclosure. In such a scenario where political parties try to stake claim to collective wisdom and aspirations, can they be the exceptions?
Well, as far as I am concerned, the political parties are public bodies, and transactions by political parties should be transparent. As far as the electoral funding is concerned, the scheme of electoral bond brought about a few years back only talks about channelizing the donations through the banks, but not the information relating to the donor. Public bodies like political parties should be more transparent in the transactions. And if the electoral bond is an improvement according to the government, I'm afraid it is not adequate, because people should know whether person who is donating is influencing government policies or not. Now, the problem is that the present system of funding is as bad as the electoral bonds as well, because the public have a right to know how much is contributed by each person, whether there is any nexus between the donor and the donee. So I have suggested a further improvement on this by way of National Election Fund, where the money is not given by the donors to the political parties, but it is channelized through an independent agency like National Election Fund, which can be administered by the Election Commission in consultation with all political parties. In which case, people will know who is, at least people will know the corporates are not influencing policy decisions.
Sure. Important points there, Mr. Krishnamurthy. We'll come to that one by one. First, let's talk about the people's right to know. That has been answered in the negative by the Attorney General of the country. The Attorney General seems to have argued, seems to have submitted before the Apex Court that there is no right to know. Now, the legalities aside, of course, the 5-judge Constitution bench will be looking at the legality of it all. But simply on the merits of this argument, as a voter, can you and I, is it reasonable for a voter such as you and I to seek clarity from the political party as to who is funding you, so as I can make an informed decision? Is that a reasonable expectation, a reasonable right of the voter?
I have no hesitation in saying that the voter is entitled to know. Whether the political parties are willing to disclose it or not is the issue. The issue is the donor should be known, for the voter to know whether I'm voting a party which is receiving donation from a corporate or any other donor who is going to influence the policy decision. So as a voter, I will always insist on total transparency by the donor. If you are not able to give that kind of a transparency, it is better to channelize the entire amount through a National Election Fund.
Sure. Let me take that up then and raise one of the concerns that has been pointed out by the petitioners in this case. One of the concerns has been is that given as how only the SBI issues these electoral bonds, and that the SBI, the promoter shareholder, of course, is the government in this case, therefore there is an undue advantage that the government of the day has with respect to electoral funding. Is that a fair assessment, that the government of the day may have undue benefits, given that it's only the SBI that's issuing electoral bonds, only they know who's funding which party?
That may be the normal inference, but even giving the benefit of doubt to the government that they are not aware of what is happening in State Bank, which is the collector of these funds. My larger issue is if you want to keep the quality of democracy absolutely pure, it is necessary to disclose who gives funds to political parties. I have no doubts about that.
Understood. Let's then talk about the alternative that you've presented. The argument that the government often makes in defense of the electoral bonds is that, look, the alternative is quite bleak. At least under this system, we have tax-paid money. That is white money in bank accounts that is being funneled towards political parties. At least it is not black money. That's the concern that the government raises. Is there an alternative to this? You've talked about a national electoral trust. What will be the way forward if not the electoral bonds?
No, how do you say it's the white money that is coming into the bank? You do not know who is the donor. How do you say that it is?
That's the government's assertion.
White money. I know it's what the government says, but as a voter, I'm asking: am I not entitled to know who gives the money? I have an interest in the quality of democracy in this country. To make it more and more transparent, that is my request. That is my appeal. So, as far as the alternative method is concerned, it takes away the obnoxious nexus between the donor and the donee. It is the election commission which will administer this fund in consultation with all the political parties. Now, you know, many of the, for example, TV allotment timings, etc., the public TV channels, the allotment is given by the election commission. Similarly, it is possible. I do agree there are some difficulties in that, but it is possible to find a solution about the utilization of the collection of the fund and the utilization of the fund in a manner that is acceptable to major national and regional parties.
Mr. Krishnamurthy, what you're suggesting is a wholesale reform of this electoral funding process. Who would you trust? How would you take this process of reform forward? The AG's assessment seems to be that, look, save it for the parliament. It is a case of parliamentary debate. Let us decide how to take this forward. That's the best course of action. Or can there be a case made for judicial intervention?
Now, as far as the legal issues are concerned, although I'm a law student myself, I don't think I'm competent to answer, as qualified judges will decide ultimately. But my personal view is that the voter should know all information about political funding. If you cannot provide that, please make it through a national election fund. Because ultimately, today somebody is in power, tomorrow somebody else will be in power. Are they going to use these provisions for their own benefit? This is the question that a voter will ask. So you have to provide an enduring solution to the problem.
Right, Mr. Krishnamurthy, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective. Important points these, and similar concerns have been raised before the Apex Court as well. Tomorrow, we understand a 5-judge bench headed by the Chief Justice himself will deliberate, will start hearing this issue. The expectation is that the Supreme Court may look to give some clarity ahead of the upcoming general elections. But that, unfortunately, is all the time that we have. It's a wrap on this edition of Business 360. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned to CNBC TV 18. The news and updates continue on the other side.